Honestly, I think I might just bring back the Bass Pro hat. What do you guys think? Alright, so this is me in 2008. I was around 7 years old, and by the look on my face, you can tell that I had absolutely no idea that we were in the brink of one of our country's biggest recessions. Frankly, I was mostly worried about finishing this stupid happy birthday song so I could eat this cake in front of me, which was strawberry flavored, my favorite. As I tried my best to stuff my face with cake as fast as I could, in the other side of the globe, the US economy was falling apart.
Let's talk about the speed with which we are watching this market deteriorate. We're red everywhere, essentially. Down by 4-5%.
We're down over 16%. Dow at the same time has fallen about 18%.
In about a month, Lehman Brothers, one of the biggest investment banks in the world, worth roughly around $60 billion just a year prior, would file for bankruptcy, signaling to the rest of the world just how bad the health of the American financial system really was.
When Lehman Brothers collapsed, 26,000 employees lost their jobs and millions of investors lost all or almost all of their money.
But how did we get there? Look, explaining the causes of the 2008 financial crisis is much easier said than done. So much so that there are countless movies out there all about 2008 or that take place during it. If you want to fully nerd out on it, I will be linking some really good YouTube videos as well as movie recommendations in the video's description so you can invite your Tinder date over and really impress them. That was a joke. Do not do that if you want a second date. What I'm gonna do in this video instead is explaining very simple terms what happened, why it happened, and how similar was 2008 to our current economic state. So let's get started. Before we do that though, I just found out that over 70% of you guys watching my videos are not subscribed. Crazy, right? So as a token of my appreciation for you, here's what gas used to cost back in 2018. Now that we got that out of the way, let's travel back to 2006. Up until that point, home prices were going up like there was no tomorrow. Real estate was growing at a very high and consistent rate, with everybody seeing real estate as a very solid, low-risk investment. Everybody seemed to have really good faith in the US housing market. After all, everybody needs a place to live, right? So Americans went to town and started buying homes like there was no tomorrow. With the booming house market, investment companies started thinking about ways they could profit from this growth in the mortgage lending sector. So they began to repackage these mortgages into low-risk investment products, such as mortgage-backed securities and collateralized debt obligations. Now, the problem was that with the growing popularity of these investment products, banks actually started running out of mortgages, which then led mortgage lenders to relax their requirements to approve mortgages. So suddenly, folks who had no business buying homes were getting mortgages at times even without proof of employment or a good standing credit history. In the early stages of 2006, the dominoes started to fall as home prices peaked and started to actually fall. Homeowners were looking at their mortgages and trying to wrap their head around the fact that they were underwater in their own home, meaning that they owed more money to the bank than their house was actually worth in the market. Similar feeling that Maserati owners get after 1 year of ownership of their car. Now, do you remember earlier when I said that people with no credit to finance an ice cream cone were getting mortgages? Yeah, well, those people stopped paying their mortgages altogether, leading then to their lenders filing for bankruptcy. To put this into perspective for you, just in 2 months, over 25 subprime lenders went under. With time, more and more banks started to go under as they really struggled with liquidity, and investors couldn't redeem their assets for cash. By the winter of 2008, the United States was officially in a recession. Now, at this time, the federal government was trying to figure out how much part in this did they really want and how much did they want to get involved. You see, Ben Bernanke thought that banks got themselves into this position, so they should work with each other to find a way out, without the help of the federal government. He tried his best to get other banks to bail failing banks out, but even with the help of big financial firms such as JP Morgan and Bank of America, which respectively bought Bear Stearns and Merrill Lynch, other banks were still struggling to stay in business, and government intervention was eventually inevitable. In October 2008, Congress finally agreed to get involved, passing a $700 billion emergency act, which the government used to purchase distressed assets from these investment banks in order to stabilize the American financial system. The government also purchased common stock in these banks and requested a 5% dividend should be paid, which would then increase to 9% in 2013, encouraging banks to purchase back their stock before the interest rate increases. Now guys, there's a lot to talk about this act and how banks actually use this money, so if you guys would like me to expand on that, I'll be happy to talk about it. For the purpose of this video though, I wanted to just briefly skim over 2008 and compare it to the current state of our economy. Now, since I was a little kid back in 2008, I don't really remember what it was like living through a recession, and it doesn't help that I actually lived in Brazil during that time. However, that might change since all of us might experience what it's like to live through a recession next quarter. Basically speaking, a recession is defined by a significant decline in economic activities, which is often interpreted as 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth in the GDP, meaning that spending on American goods and services has declined. Now, there are also other factors that economists use to define whether we're in a recession or not, including household debt and unemployment. When looking back at 2008, unemployment did rise, and that was due to the economic hardships going on at the time. For the most part, people did want to work. Businesses just were unable or didn't want to hire them. Now, even though as of right now, we haven't seen major changes in unemployment, some companies such as Wells Fargo and Coinbase have already begun layoffs, while many companies in the tech sector such as Meta/Facebook and Google have introduced hiring freezes, signaling that companies are hitting the brakes on hiring and deciding which employees can they afford to keep during this time. With all of that said, even though unemployment cannot tell us for sure how similar are we to 2008, other factors such as rising credit card debt and with the personal savings rate falling to its lowest level since 2008, our economic state is starting to look very similar to what it looked like back then. So to answer your question, no, the 2008 financial crisis and the potential upcoming recession have similar effects on our economy, such as unemployment rate and household debt, but are very distinct in theory. You see, the 2008 financial crisis was caused by questionable, if not malicious, financial activities from these investment banks. Many banks were actually aware that a lot of these junk mortgages were packed into AAA mortgage bundles, and even with that information, they still marketed them as low-risk investment products. The banks were way too leveraged, and as they fell, they took our economy down with them. This time around, there are many factors that play into our recession, inflation being the biggest one of them, but systematic factors such as supply chain bottlenecks and the war in Ukraine played a big role in getting us here, and there really wasn't much we could do about it. Right now, the Federal Reserve's biggest concern is getting the inflation rate down, even if that means throwing our whole economy into a recession. But do you know why the Federal Reserve cares so much about inflation? Then click this video right here if you want to find out why.